Hey everyone, Howie Fisher with Precision Fly Fishing in Mount Holly Springs, Pennsylvania. Today I'm tying up a Sulphur PMD dry fly emerger. This is a pattern by John and Katie Demuth from Demuth Fly Fishing. To get started with the hook, I'm using an Ahrex Freshwater 525 in size 14. You could also use the 527, which is their big gap dry hook. For the thread to start, I'm using 140 Denier in brown. This is actually going to be the ribbing, which is why I'm using such a large Denier here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and snip my tag off. And then I'm going to grab my Shuck here, which is McFlylon. You could use Z-Lon, you could use Sparkle Emerger. I believe Sparkle Emerger is what the Demuths originally used with this, but use whatever you have. I'm going to go ahead and grab a little bit. Here I'm actually just using half of a strand. And I'm going to go ahead and bring this down to well into the bend here. And then I'm going to grab my main thread here, which is UTC 70 Denier in yellow. So again, the brown is just going to be the ribbing. As you can see, I'm just letting it hang on the back here. I'm going to go ahead and bring my yellow all the way down to the same point as the brown, and then I'm going to bring it back up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take out a large section of this brown and then snip it off so the bobbin is out of the way. You want enough to work with here, but you don't need to use too much, but make sure you give yourself enough. For the Biot here, I'm using Turkey Biots in tannish yellow. This is going to be the main portion of the body. I'm going to go ahead and tie it on and again bring this back down to the same point as the Shuck, and then bring my thread back up. And then I'm going to start wrapping my Biot forward with overlapping or touching wraps. Make sure to avoid that hook point. To finish this, you probably want to grab a pair of tweezers or something similar. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap this to about a hook point, or sorry, an eye or an eye and a half behind the hook eye itself. You want to make sure that you can get it secure. So then I'm going to take my brown thread that I've left hanging. I'm going to cord it up, and then I'm going to take wraps in between the sections of Biot. This step isn't completely necessary. As you can see, there is kind of some brown in this Biot itself. If you want to skip this step, though, you're welcome to do that. I'm going to go ahead and secure this tag, snip it off, and then I'm going to reposition my hook here and snip off this shucking trail. You want the shuck to be about the same size as the body of the fly. For the first wing here, I'm using Select Cow Elk from Nature's Spirit. I'm going to go ahead and cut off a little clump and prepare it like you would normally do so. So I'm going to remove any short fibers, all the under fur, and then make sure that it gets stacked nice and evenly. The more under fur, especially, and the short fibers that you can pull out, the better. It's going to make stacking this a lot easier, and it's going to make the fly a little bit more enjoyable to tie because you won't be as frustrated. So now I'm going to tie this in. This is designed to be a mayfly, so you don't want this wing to be super long like a caddis. So I'm going to make it about half the length of the body itself of the fly. So this is designed to look like an emerging or the wings of a mayfly that are starting to emerge, starting to bud out. For the dubbing on this, I'm using SLF in sulfur orange or burnt orange. And I'm doing just a little bit, so I'm going to put this in here. One is a hot spot, but also kind of that sulfur orange. But I'm also doing this to push the elk wing back, but also give the CDC, which here is yellow, something to prop up on to kind of push the CDC up rather than make it lay down flat. So here I'm using 2 feathers laid or stacked, 3 feathers stacked on top of each other. Depends on the thickness of the CDC that you're using, the fullness of it. And I'm going to go ahead and snip off that excess. And the thing that I like about this pattern is instead of throwing those extras or leftovers away, I'm actually going to use them for this next step, which is a CDC dubbing loop. So again, I'm going to go ahead and take one of those feathers, and I'm going to go ahead and prepare it in a chip clip for a CDC dubbing loop. 1 or 2 feathers, whatever, again, depending on the thickness or the fullness of your feathers here. So I'm going to get it ready in the chip clip, snip off the stems. You can also do the same or achieve the same thing by just folding the feather, 1 feather over and putting all of the strands of the single feather into the clip. So to get started with my split thread dubbing loop, I'm going to go ahead and spin my thread counterclockwise if you're looking down on it. And what this does is it's going to open up the thread, and it's actually going to flatten it out. Sorry, my CDC's giving me a hard time here. So just trying to make sure that it is where it needs to be. So again, flattening the thread out by spinning it counterclockwise, taking a bodkin and forcing that thread to flatten itself out, as you can see me doing here. And you really want to utilize your nail here on a split thread dubbing loop. That'll really start to flatten it out. And then you're just going to split that thread with a bodkin. Then I'm going to take my chip clip in the CDC and insert it into this dubbing loop, and then release the fibers. To close this dubbing loop up, I'm going to go ahead and spin the bobbin clockwise, so the opposite direction that I originally spun it, and this is going to close that loop up. And as it's spinning, you can just take your scissors or a bodkin and just make sure that no fibers are getting trapped in the thread, because it'll catch itself. So starting from where that dubbing ball is, I'm going to go ahead and wrap, and with each turn, I'm going to go ahead and preen these fibers back because I don't want any getting in the hook eye. And while I'm holding everything back, I'm just going to go ahead and take a couple wraps to push everything backwards. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a 3 or 4 turn whip finish. Seat my knot well and snip my thread off. And there you have it. This is again a PMD sulfur emerger pattern that's really effective. On all my flies, even my dry flies, I like to hit it with a little bit of Solar as bone dry. Just make those wraps as secure as possible and make this fly last as long as possible. But there you have it again. This is Demuth's CDC Sulphur. Tie them up, fish them. Let us know what you think, and hopefully this is a productive pattern for you.